My name's Kenny. I do product at a company called Lusic. I've always worked in developer tools, particularly in open source developer tools. So I had to start in open source infrastructure and OpenStack and Kubernetes. I worked at GitLab for a long time, and now I work at Lusic. I've always enjoyed the kind of messy part of software development, the day two part of software development, particularly like after you've deployed your app and now what? And how do you collaborate in larger code bases? So kind of all the stuff past greenfield, initial deployments, hey, this is fun, but the kind of now what of how do we deliver continuous improvements on our experience to our users. I'm personally excited to be in a room full of mobile developers. As a former mobile developer myself, I'm also personally excited to be in a room full of Android users as a lifelong Android user myself. Funny story, I had a first career in a totally different environment, and there were about 120 of us. Actually was a political group, so we were asking, hey, what does everybody use for their phones? This is back in 2010. Of course, in politics, and everyone was addicted to their BlackBerries in 2010 and sending messages everywhere. There was probably 80% who were on their BlackBerries, 20% had an iPhone, and I was the only Android user at the time. I had the original HTC Dream, so I've been a lifelong Android user, and like I said, I'm excited to be here amongst you all. My talk is about Agentic AI, and really I want to talk about the last word of this talk sentence, the delivering app experiences, because that's what we're here for. We're here to deliver great, wonderful experiences to our users, and I'm excited about the way that AI can do that. When I think about the future of mobile development, I think it's important to do a little bit of a view of the past. So I think many of us understand, or a lot of people think, let's say, that smartphones started with the invention of the iPhone in 2007. But really, it was a concept that had its infancy even before then. There were devices in the 90s like the IBM personal communicator and Nokia communicator that had its own operating system. None of them had app environments, and many of them were notoriously very difficult to develop on top of. But there was this kind of notion of, hey, mobile is a new computing platform, and we need to offer developers the opportunity to create custom experiences for users on those platforms. Obviously, during the late 90s and early 2000s, we had BlackBerries and Windows attempt with Windows Mobile. When you think about what happened in 2007 with the launch of the iPhone, yes, it was a touchscreen, and there was a lot of, obviously, notion around that. But I think actually the most interesting part, going back to this experiences question around what happened in 2007 was Safari, because you had this kind of UI, full-fledged, we can deliver an experience similar to what we could deliver on desktop in a mobile browser. Before that, most mobile browsers were just reading text and showing you a text-only display of a website. So that, from an experience perspective, really revolutionized, what can we do with these devices now that they're touch, and we can have a much richer visual experience. Obviously, when that launched, there was no app store. It was very difficult to program on anything for an Apple device at that time. And then, obviously, a year later, in 2008, Android 1.0 comes out. The first device is the HTC Dream, this really fun, I still think a very fun hybrid between the two with a touch screen and the flip-out keyboard. I wish I still had mine today. And the really cool thing, obviously, for all of us here is that it launches with what was then called the Android market, but is now what we know as the Google Play Store. For those of you who are around, you also remember that it came with a really rich set of development environments and SDKs for you to then program apps against. And that's what really launches this giant explosion of apps and app developers around the world. Interestingly enough, that was 17 years ago, almost to the day. And you can just think of all that's happened in those past 17 years. The phase two is really that explosion. So I think in 2008, there were initially 16,000 apps in the App Store. By 2013, there's 1 million, and obviously I think there's hundreds of millions of apps available today. This is also a time where we start professionalizing the craft of app development. So in the early 2000s, there were essentially 0 mobile app developers. Today, there's something like 26 million. We started seeing tools become more robust. So you have Android Studio and Xcode get developed that are giving better development practices to mobile developers, and also applying some of the lessons learned from other software development life cycles to mobile specifically. Think of things like more progressive delivery and more safety in your rollout, feature flags, more robust testing, shifting left of quality control. All those kinds of practices start applying to mobile that had been kind of experimented with other tools. There's an important thing, especially when it comes to mobile experiences that happened during this time, and that's that there is a class of companies that are now competing for market share and winning by delivering the best mobile experience. So you start seeing large companies, if you remember the Uber and Lyft wars, Lyft was largely focused on how do we deliver a better experience to our users, but there starts to be this notion amongst mobile teams about what it means to be a quality app, what it means to deliver an amazing experience. And you follow that through line through to today. Obviously, all the stores are now using a quality gate of some kind. Some are very obscure and some are very transparent to say we now expect a certain level of quality from apps, and that quality is the thing that we gatekeep whether your app gets through and can be published on our stores. We start seeing more sophistication in the way we do that testing, so the emergence of device farms and mobile CI/CD platforms come about. And all of that is trending in the right direction. And then the moment that I think we should all remember from this phase 2 is the pandemic, which fundamentally reset what users expect that they can do on their mobile app. The key statistic is users went from spending 3 hours on their phone pre-pandemic to 5 hours post-pandemic, at 5 hours plus nowadays. And it's also a set of capabilities that users were previously never really comfortable performing on a phone are now very common and expected. Things like, I'm going to purchase an airline ticket. People generally didn't do that before the pandemic, but now they expect that they will make large purchases. Renting a house, people expect to be able to do that on an app. Buying a car, people will order and ship cars entirely from a mobile app. These are experiences that people previously would have shied away from and would have done on web, but now the expectation because of the pandemic and us being locked in our homes is that we can do everything from our mobile device. Think about that for a minute, because I think this trend, particularly from what experiences we deliver for users, has really impacted the way all brands think about mobile apps. Every brand, every company you think about has the desire to have a mobile app because it's an amazing channel for connecting closely with users and meeting them where they are. Obviously we have these in our pockets everywhere we go. And so there has been a really big shift amongst corporations that it's not just like we need to have mobile and it needs to copycat what we have in web. The new general paradigm is we should be leading innovation in our mobile app. We should be delivering new experiences that are only available on mobile because that's where we have the most engagement with our users. So those are the first 2 phases, and then obviously we're here, it's 2025. The third phase is largely driven by how AI will impact mobile development. But I watched the keynote. I think it's important to distinguish 2 different factors or ways in which AI is going to impact mobile development. One is how we build apps. So we all use AI tools in our software lifecycle, and we will continue to be more robust in how we do that. And the other is the types of apps we build. And I'm excited about both of them, but I'm really excited about the experiences that we can build with AI and how we can kind of unlock, as mobile developers, a new class of experiences that we couldn't do before we had AI, particularly like on-device models. So what does that mean? We've already started to see this. We moved from being tool-assisted to kind of like agent-led development. We're not necessarily, I think many people are moving from just one-shot prompt engineering to more sophisticated systems that analyze intent and input and what you're trying to achieve and produce plans for executing on that. We're moving really from being reactive to proactive in managing the quality of our experience that we're delivering for users. That also goes with observability. I've never really liked the word observability because it tends to be very lean back, like, oh, let me just observe and see what's out there. But we really want to be action-oriented. We want to be able to take what we observe, the data, gather insights, and come up with action plans for what we should do about that and how we should improve the experience based on what we're seeing our users experience in the wild. Maintenance, I think, is another part where we're seeing the shift in how we develop apps. So lots of surveys highlighted somewhere between 50 and 60%, particularly for mobile teams, of a team's time is spent on maintenance. This is things like a long-running declarative UI transition, or upgrading to the latest operating system, or ensuring that you're keeping up with quality so your app can continue to pass App Store gates. That is a really big burden. 50% of your time spent on things that aren't progressing the experience of your app, but are instead kind of keeping up with the level playing field that you've already defined. And agents are starting to shift that away. They're looking for, I think all of us should be looking for toilsome work and figuring out how we can employ agents to help us with that toilsome work, so we can focus on the things that, I loved this word that somebody used in the keynote, the things that only we as quintessentially humans can do. That's really going to come down to humans are quintessentially only capable of creating novel experiences, and AI is not going to be able to create anything novel or a new experience for you that your users are never going to have seen before, that really differentiates you from other products in your market. And that's what we really want as developers to be able to spend our time on. I mentioned at the beginning that I started my life in open source infrastructure in particular. And I think there's an interesting analogy to a concept that we used in infrastructure in the 2012, 2013, when the rise of VMs and containers were coming around. And that's this notion of pets versus cattle. I don't know, many of you might be familiar with this analogy, but for those who aren't, the idea of pets versus cattle, pets was like when, in the olden days when we had servers, we would treat them like pets. We would raise them, we would intentionally install the right software on them manually, we would patch them manually, we would make sure that if they got sick, we were very involved in healing them. We would even like give them names. You remember back in those days, you probably had servers with specific names, and they're all funny names that usually had some similar theme. The cattle's approach is, if you think of them as virtual machines that can be spun up and down on demand, or containers, you don't have to spend as much time in that feeding and caring, and you can spend more time in building a system that ensures the fleet or herd of them is healthy. That analogy breaks down a little bit when you think about an app, because an app is still a unique package that you're delivering for your customers. But I do think we need to start thinking about the broader system around an app that enables us to spend less time on toilsome maintenance tasks and more time on improving the experience. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that idea and architecture through the course of this talk. I really want to pause on this last point, though, and that's that today, I don't think we've yet experienced an app that fully takes advantage of AI in the way that it delivers an experience to us. I don't know if you all feel the same way, but I really do not like everything needs to be a chatbot and I just interact with an app via a chatbot. I want rich experiences. I think we have the opportunity to deliver personalized experiences. So today we generally build apps for the lowest common denominator. We say, well, this is what most users want, and so we're going to build the UI for what generally everybody tends to want. But we have this opportunity to deliver more dynamic user experiences, using on-device models to create more of that UX on the fly. Maybe it's dependent upon previous understanding of users' preferences from other apps. Maybe it's dependent upon the weather. Maybe it's on their intent at that time of day. But you can imagine you have a much more fluid and dynamic experience that you're delivering for your users. And frankly, I haven't really seen an app that transforms itself to deliver dynamic experiences in this way, but I'm excited, and I'm sure someone in this room will be the first to develop it. What's driving this change? So obviously the foundational models are getting better, and even 2 or 3 years ago when the first models came out, there was a general understanding that, hey, these models aren't great, particularly at languages that don't have a large open source corpus to be trained on. I think we're seeing that prove to be wrong. These models are continuing to improve on benchmarks on even languages that don't have the robust JavaScript corpus that might be available today. Also, this concept of agents, I think, and the accessibility of agents is really important. Agents can be a word that is thrown around a lot, but they're essentially just structured LLM workflows that use tools. So if you think about, hey, I have an LLM that can analyze certain information, give me structured output, use different tools to pass that output between things, it really kind of becomes a task machine more than anything. Obviously, we're seeing continued improvement from the operating systems and their ability to host and run on-device models, which I think means you get a more robust ability to alter the experience for your users. And then the last thing that's driving this change, again, harkens back to the phase 2, has nothing to do with AI. It's just there's a lot of pressure for us to deliver great experiences on mobile. And that's because it's becoming it is the primary compute platform that users interact with. It's the place where brands know their that people's opinion about that brand is made. It's where customers make choices between what things they want to buy and what tools they want to use and what experiences they want to have. So the pressure is just continuing to mount that we can't just deliver run-of-the-mill experiences. And that's my worry with AI, is that when we use AI in software, we're going to just use it to not do anything novel. So I really want all of us as developers to think about how can we use AI not to do boilerplate things, but help it to push aside the things that are toilsome and that we don't need to spend as much of our time on, so we can, as humans, focus on the novel things that we can deliver. We're already starting to see this, and so I just wanted to give some observations around how teams are changing as a result of the impact of this new era. We're seeing teams get reshaped. Many of you who work on larger apps might have already experienced this, that there's this kind of productization of the app where individual teams, smaller teams, work on specific subsets of the app and have ownership of that and are given tools and have a platform team to then go pursue that in a very quick fashion. We're seeing, because of that, a higher need for how we route issues to the right people. So particularly when it comes to quality or even feature improvements, it's really hard to know which team is responsible for this quality issue and make sure that they get assigned to it and are working to fix it. That tends to be in large complex code bases, not as simple as just like a path or a screen ownership set structure. And so we're starting to see more AI-powered ability to assign the right issue to the right team. The slide says AI-driven observability. I think it's like AI-driven by observability. So I think one thing we're starting to see is because AI is good at analyzing complex pieces of information, and you can create agents that then create a workflow for you, you can get to the point where it's identifying an issue, a root cause, even proposing a fix. All of that is only possible because it has access to observability data about what's happening in the wild. So we really should, like I said, stop thinking about observability as just a capability of your app and more thinking about it as a really useful tool that your agents can use to help you reduce some of the toil work in managing and running a large, sophisticated app. Obviously, we're seeing accelerated velocity in development teams. I'm going to talk a little bit in a second, but I do worry that one of the primary use cases for AI is creating more tests, and actually more tests, if not chosen correctly, slow down your velocity. So it's important to remember that we have to not just add thousands of tests to our app, but we have to focus on running the right tests at the right time so that we can continue to push for accelerated development in our apps so that we can respond quickly and deliver more for our customers. And then lastly, I think that there is a real challenge as you and your teams are delivering more dynamic experiences to your users. It's really hard to know what your user experienced. So there is this really heavy emphasis on, let me understand what my user actually experienced in my app. Because today it's non-deterministic, essentially. Like you can't test for exactly how an LLM is going to respond to a user. Even if you're using a chatbot in your app today, you're going to find it difficult to know exactly what happened in a specific user experience unless you know exactly what that user saw on their screen and what logs happened on their device. I've given this talk before, and in the past I've spent some time talking about, like, hey, remember, agents and AI don't replace developers, they replace tasks. I think a year or 2 years ago, certainly, and maybe a year ago, there was a lot of fear about, like, what is the role of a software developer going forward. I think we're largely behind that now, and that generally, teams are focused on, hey, we get productivity benefits, we get less need to focus on things that maybe AI is good at, and more time to focus on the things that AI is not great at, and that we are really going to be able to deliver more value for our company and our team and our users than we previously could. So some of the patterns we're seeing, Obviously, you all are probably using code assistants in your IDEs, helping with scaffolding and addressing errors. As I mentioned, people are using AI to say like automatically write a bunch of tests. There's another really interesting use case, and I think I saw a company that does something similar here, where it helps you select in your pipelines and in your even in manual QA processes what you need to test based on an AI algorithm. So it's a little bit smarter than just like you know, we run certain tests if certain files are hit, but actually enables you to run the right tests at the right time in your pipeline so that you're not slowing down velocity. And then, you know, we're seeing in the development process this kind of progressive rollout release process happening, sometimes using agents to analyze what's happening in pre-production environments or beta environments and decide, hey, should we progress this release to the next environment. On the observability side, certainly, we're moving from just thinking about observability as a bunch of data that we have at our resource and more about the insights that it derives, being proactive about that issue detection and spotting them before maybe even your users do. And then certainly there are teams that are working on auto remediation to spot an issue, determine the root cause, propose a PR, get everything ready for you as a developer to merge so that you could spend less time fixing issues that have known solutions. Then again, lastly, this how do we use AI in our apps to deliver better experiences? For those who are developers of apps in this room, how many of you have a like AI chatbot in your app that answers questions for your users? Does anybody? Yeah, I think this is becoming a pattern largely for discovery, and I know I mentioned I don't like the pattern for that being the primary way we interact with apps. Certainly I wouldn't want that as a user. But I do think for discovering what's going on in my app or answering a question that can be hard to discover within your app, it's really useful. But I think we're moving to dynamic UX. One thing I've started to see is like many of your apps will have like a section in the profile that's kind of like the UX settings for that user. That should be the kind of thing we can infer or know about that user and not have to ask them to go dig into a menu and push a toggle button to set some UI settings. We should be able to understand that and deliver that dynamically. But then you can imagine that going a lot further, that the user experience can be completely customized for what you know your user's intent to be at that exact moment. Banking apps are always a good example, but like maybe people almost always after payday perform a couple of transfers. So when they pull up your app, it's completely customized experience where the UI is kind of like front loading, hey, here's the transfer window because we know you're here probably to perform a transfer. Or maybe people like to make sure they make a phone call to their mom on a sunny day so they can go for a walk with them. Like, just think about these are things that aren't necessarily deterministic, but they're influenced by a number of factors, and you can deliver a really customized experience to your user based on what you know about their intent. So that's some of the emerging patterns we're seeing. I want to talk about the architecture for this, and this kind of goes back to that cattle and pets analogy. And again, I don't think the analogy works completely, but really, like, your app is more than just its APK. It's the series of agents that encircle that APK that enable you to do all the other things in app development that aren't just shipping that APK. And so that includes testing, fixing, deploying. You can think about building a system around your app that performs many of these tasks, and maybe it starts performing individual tasks so that you can get some of the offload of that burden. It's more like thinking about your app and its software development lifecycle as one unit. And so you need to think about, hey, as a developer, if me and my team want to spend less time on this one task in our software development cycle, how do we use agents to obviate that need? And over time, you'll build up a whole series of agents that can perform many of these tasks so that your app gets ever closer to kind of the self-healing ideal. This is where I have this concept called zero maintenance apps. Now, obviously, we all want, as humans, to be in the loop, so I'm not saying humans don't ever think about maintenance, but you should be spending significantly less of your time. 50% is a lot of a mobile team's time to be spending on things that AI could be good at, and that, you know, frankly, if we're mobile developers, we didn't do it because we wanted to spend time upgrading to the latest operating system version or doing a UI framework upgrade. We spent it because we're developers because we want to deliver great experiences. And so I think there's lots of ways that you can accomplish this. As I mentioned, it's really about thinking holistically about the system of your app and really analyzing where you're spending your time in software development and looking for the places that you can actually utilize AI to solve a problem that was previously unsolvable so that your app is maintaining itself. Let me give you some concrete examples. I think the first thing is just this reimagining of your whole software development lifecycle is in part with your app. This is a DevOps principle for a while, but if we think about it from a software perspective, we actually have non-tool solutions. We can have software solutions that enable us to improve our development velocity, spend less time on maintenance and toil. I think it's really important to experiment with the agent packages and tools that are out there. Yes, this can be uncomfortable, but there are lots of guides for just how to build simple agents using all of the modern LLMs. And it will help you understand what tools are useful, how you can solve specific problems. So I think that experimentation is important. And the concept of AI pipelines of, hey, I'm going to react to certain triggers and then have those triggers perform specific agentic workflows. A really simple one is like, hey, when there's a dependency upgrade, it's like the dependency bot process, but you can imagine crafting that kind of yourself to say, hey, there's this dependency upgrade that I get triggered by, my agent is going to run a workflow and propose the fixes. Obviously, there are tools that do that today, but I think it's a good exercise just to get a sense of what is accomplishable here. Obviously, you need to make sure you're collecting the data, and so there's a set of questions and tasks that aren't going to be possible without having some production insights into what's happening with your users in the real world. So thinking about your telemetry data as another tool that your agents can utilize. And then I think lastly, it's like really, somebody in the keynote said, we all need to get back to being technologists at heart, and that means exploring new technologies. All of these technologies aren't, in Dart and Flutter and Kotlin necessarily, and so they're important for you to be able to explore back-end technologies and be more conversant in the whole part of your app, not just the APK part of your app. Leading teams are doing this today, so I do want to inspire some action that the most modern mobile development teams are already in this process of reducing the amount of time they spend fixing crashes, building more test generation and making sure they're selecting the right tests to speed up development velocity, using observability to directly take action, whether that's some more sophisticated app teams already have rollback ability. So if there's a performance degradation or a business impact, they'll automatically roll back to a previous app version that was already deployed on the store. Many of you probably use feature flags, so they'll use feature flags to manage a bad user experience, to turn off a troublesome experience without even having human intervention. And then obviously the intelligent rollout part of making sure that as they roll out new app versions in a regular release train, they're kind of doing that without the manual intervention of those of us on Android of like manually checking the percentage or your metrics and then adjusting the percentage. So this is happening. It is here. And it's brought about by this change in process and tools and perspective. It's really about how do we replace tasks that aren't as quintessentially human as the main tasks that we need to do. Thinking about all of your operations as a continuous feedback loop and the systems that run them as the same part of the rest of your app. And really leaning into the fact that if you're not moving in this direction, your competitors are, and you're probably already behind. So the more you can seize this moment and enable yourselves to build apps that are really unique, the better. I'm personally very excited to see what we all build as a community, what you all in this room build for your companies. So thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm happy to take any questions, and if you have any questions that you're not comfortable asking up here, I'm also at the Lucid booth. I'll be there all afternoon.